Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A motion, please, to approve tonight's agenda. Tina Ann Shelley. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We have some presentations tonight. Mr. Pullen, I'll let you do the introductions.
Thank you, Mrs. Collier. I'm going to ask that Megan come on up and join us at the podium. She's going to go over our accountability status and our student data update for the Board of Education. She's going to talk to you a little bit about what we have to do with respect to some state scores and some things that we need to, assess a little bit further as far as doing some more professional development work. She's also going to highlight some of the progress that's being made with the winter benchmarks. Megan, turn it over to you.
So, as Mr. Pullen said, we're going to go over our accountability status and our winter benchmark information. Everything we do is grounded in our mission and vision. And again, we're going to focus on the community promise that relates to instructional practices tonight. So the Every Student Succeeds Act, they provided an accountability status for all districts and schools in New York State. And ours recently came out, and our high school and elementary school are considered a local support and improvement schools. So in the old terms, that was we were in good standing. They changed the terminology because they didn't want people to feel like if they were in good standing that their work was done. So they changed the terminology a little bit so that everybody keeps on trying to improve. But our high school and elementary fall under that. For our middle school, we are a targeted support and improvement school. And the reason for this is because they look down at different subgroups. And we have two subgroups that did not make the expected progress that they would want to see. So the first subgroup is English language learners. And for that group, they need at least 30 English language learners that take the test to be able to look at the data. And if they don't have 30, which they didn't for our district, they not only looked at last year's data, but the year before and combined it. So in many cases, you might be looking at the same student twice to determine those scores to see how they're doing. The other area is Hispanic students, and some of our English language learner students are Hispanic students, so then they'd be looking at the same students again, but some of them are not. Just as some of our English language learners are from different countries as well, they're not Hispanic. So some of them are the same, some of them aren't. So whenever a middle or school is determined to be a targeted support and improvement school, any school that's in the district that falls under that automatically makes the district a targeted support and improvement district. So that is why our district is also identified as a TSI. So for this piece, this is really something that we have to do some plans locally to make sure that we are showing that we are doing things to improve. This is not a point where the state comes out and assists us or mandates things, but there are a couple plans that we will be working on. So when we received our accountability status, we did have Rich Yeoman come out from BOCES, and he really helped us understand the data and what students to really dive down into to see what we could do to make sure that those students are making the gains that we need. We looked to make sure that those specific students were in intervention groups, targeting the skills that they were lacking. And the way we could look at that is not only from their iReady data, but also from their state test score data. We could go in actually to the questions they answered, look at the item analysis, and see what they were lacking to make sure that we're hitting those pieces. We have to create and implement the school comprehensive education plan. This is actually a lengthy plan that has a lot of work that goes into it before we even start writing it. So we will need to collect different stakeholders, including teachers, including parents of the stakeholder groups, community members, administrators, to go through a lot of different processes to come up with a shared plan for the school. And then after the school one is done, then we have to create the district comprehensive improvement plan, because that's actually based off of the school plan. All the information that we have to meet is in the IRS portal, so we go on there to make sure that we're looking at all the deadlines for completion and the forms that we need to fill out. And then there is some grant money associated with having this designation. So Lori Elliott is working to apply for that, and that is due in April. So this is something that we'll be working on the rest of the school year. It's due June 30th, and it's to put into place for next school year. Yeah, Paul?
I just want to make sure that this terminology is correct. So on bullet number 3, it says a comprehensive education plan, but bullet 4 says improvement plan.
Correct.
That's correct?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Jason?
How does this year's plan look compared to last year's? Did we have to have one for last year as well?
We did not.
There wasn't a requirement?
There wasn't a requirement based on that information. This is the first year we've been on one in a long time. I mean, previously in the old system we were, but this is the newer system.
Okay, the only reason I ask is because when you look at this school report card for 22, 23, and then 21, 22, they're both designated as target.
There was not any obligation for us to last year. Last year, it said we were an LSI, which was local.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Okay. So since we're talking about the middle school having that determination, we're going to start with the data measures that we're using at the high school. You can see there we switched over to iReady this year. We're using report card grades, attendance, office discipline referrals, our panorama surveys, which are our SEL surveys, data related to how students are progressing in interventions, and then our Cougar Care Room visits. So this is our 5th grade iReady reading data. What you can see here is on the left is the fall data, and the green on these charts means that those are the students that are on grade level or above. The yellow are students that are 1 grade level below, and the red is 2 or more grade levels below. And then you can see how it changed from fall to winter as far as the progress that's being made in reading at the 5th grade level. And you're going to see a lot of these charts that look the same, so stop me if you want me to slow down. But here is 6th grade for their reading. And again, you can see the fall and the red and green growing, the red getting smaller and the green growing into the winter. 7th grade reading. And 8th grade reading. Yes.
So the green is like proficient, is that the terminology I should be using?
Yes, they're on grade level or they're above, so it could be proficient or mastery.
Okay, then what's the yellow?
1 grade level below. So if they're in 8th grade, they're showing that they have skills of a 7th grader.
So that would say not proficient? I mean, is it that clear? Okay.
I think what Paul's referring to is like, how does that correlate with the state's 3 through 8 math and ELA proficiency standards? Does this graph align with that by color?
The iReady aligns with the standards and how students are doing. I can't say that if they took the state test right now that they would get scores that represent this completely, no.
Okay, and then proficient. I remember asking you this question. Proficient means like passing, right?
Yes.
So is it D, proficient?
Yeah, 65 or above. I mean, there's no true correlation for, a 65 to 70. They use 85 as mastery, but, there's so many subsets of the ELA test that this isn't measuring everything. That's why when Megan says it's not a true correlation from iReady to the state, it is in some facets of it, but not comprehensive.
It's not a perfect correlation.
Correct.
Yeah.
not the comprehensive sense.
So, but the way I would interpret this then, obviously I'm looking at, one on the left there. So about 30% of our class is proficient. That's my takeaway from that.
Yes, as of the winter benchmark, so
Yeah.
like they made 12% gain from the fall to the
Oh,
winter.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. So for the middle school, also uses iReady diagnostics for math. And so here's our 5th grade growth. Our 6th grade. Their 7th. And 8th. So obviously we want as little red as possible because we want our students to be mainly in the green, a few in the yellow, even fewer in the red. So when you look at these charts, the students who are in the red are students who are receiving those interventions that are with actual staff members and getting more intense support to try to get them to move on to the next level.
Megan, do we have kids who are reading, or who are doing math, say, at the 9th grade level? And are they included in this graph?
Mm-hmm.
They are.
Yep.
So Megan, again, looking at the one on the left here, oh wait, we can look at the one on the right. So like 49, yeah, so 49, maybe, I don't know, it's not exactly
Mhm.
50, 49, 48%. So it says they're 2 grade levels behind. So in other words, this is 8, so they're operating at a 6th grade level in math.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So we moved from 61% in the fall at 2 or more grade levels below to 48%. So we are making gains, but we need to make much, much larger gains. Some other data points that we do look at are the honor roll, high honor roll, and principal's honor roll. And this shows you at each grade level what percent of students fell within those honors. And then we also look at our failures. So we look the closest at students who are failing 2 or more classes. We look at this every 5 weeks, but this is the second quarter, 2 or more classes, percent of students in the grade level that are failing those.
So I don't see how this adds up. And I know I'm very familiar with it. About half of our school, actually, middle school and high school, is on the honor roll. But then when you go back to looking at these pie charts, only 30% of our classes is proficient.
Yes.
So I don't see how we get half of our class on the honor roll when only a third of our class is proficient.
So there's a difference when you're looking at a national norm referenced assessment versus a comprehensive report card. So it is possible that you're not meeting the national norm from iReady and still meeting the expectations of a local report card. So you'll recall a couple of years ago when we changed our elementary report card from a number system to a more standards-based. So the lift here that Megan's referring to talks about a comprehensive package, right? So we don't want our students to be test prep ready, which is part of what iReady is. We want them to be critical thinkers, problem solvers, well-rounded students. You know, we want them to be contributing members in society. Those aspects are not measured on iReady.
Right.
So it is possible to have discrepancies between a standardized assessment and then a report card. And there's a strong probability that you will see a report card committee being formed at the middle school in the near future as well, because again, when we're laying the foundation down at the elementary, last year, what we started to notice was there was too much subjectivity in how grades were being assigned at the elementary. It's not much different than what we talked about a few years ago with the high school. That there's subjectivity entering into the quarter report cards, and we're noticing the discrepancies on the Regents assessments. And so what you're looking at is a compression, and it's hitting in the middle, right? So we're making gains, we're making progress, but you're talking about lifting things in a matter of a few short years where we didn't have curriculum in one uniform place just a few short years ago. So the iReady, I believe, is in its first full year of implementation here. It's the same with the high school. And then later on in your presentation, you'll see that iReady will be an assessment tool that we'll be implementing at the elementary next, because we can't continue to do more of the same and expect different results. So that component that you see here, I would say, again, is our standard. Could it use tweaks and adjustments? Absolutely, but it's more comprehensive of the total child versus just them as a test taker. So, because if we're just measuring them as test takers, the purpose of what we're doing with our vision and mission is really off base.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
And just one piece to go along with that, we do have in April a committee from the middle school and the high school both going to a training about equitable grading practices. And so they're really, it's something they're going to be looking into as far as, how students are given grades, how that correlates to all the other data points that we use for students.
Megan, you can't see anything. When do we give iReady again?
In the spring.
Okay.
Yep.
And I do think it's important, Mike, like you were saying, iReady is one indicator, and it's a measuring benchmark to help us understand what kids need. So, I think it looks ugly right now, but, I predict, I'm hoping that it's going to get much better.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think the consistency and the fidelity of our programming is really what we're striving for. And we talk about those foundational skills and what we're trying to build. When you put it in a uniform place, then you start to notice your gaps and you notice your overlaps. So if you were to talk about 2021 and having curriculum maps and having a clear, articulated, and viable curriculum in one place, that was really a start. Then we went to Atlas, and then we started implementing that. Then we really started revisiting the curriculum work that we were doing. Then we started looking at our formative and summative assessments. So it's a comprehensive approach that says, are we satisfied? No. Are we making gains? Yes. But I will say to you, with respect to our children, they're doing great, and our staff is definitely doing great, and they're making gains. But again, you're not going to lift this in one fell swoop. It's going to take some time. It's going to take consistency and implementation and fidelity with our approach. We can't just keep changing every year because we look over our shoulder and see somebody else is doing something different and their results are different. There's so many different variables for each and every community. What I would say to you is the middle schools also changed their approach 5 through 8. They're now departmentalized, whereas before they had a homeroom-based approach, so now they're departmentalized. They have another interventionist over here specifically for math. So those things are all things that are not in the report, but are things that we have to continue to remind ourselves and our community of, as we're constantly assessing and constantly looking to get better.
I also look at the improvement. If you look at the green, the students that made progress, that moved that to a larger percentage in the winter, those kids not only had to catch up, and because everybody's continuing, they're not testing on the same material.
You mean the goalposts keep moving?
So the kids who have progressed have made amazing progression.
I think we
start out at 2 grade levels below. We can't expect that in 3 months' time, they're going to make 2 grade levels and jump that much further. They're likely slow learners. They're likely kids with getting a lot of interventions because they need them. We can't compare them to another group that's saying that has an IQ within the average range. They don't learn at the same rate, and we have to keep that in mind.
Good point.
Okay, so now we're going to go to the high school. Again, here are the data measures that we use there. And at the high school, we use iReady for a diagnostic just for 9th and 10th graders because it really isn't meant to be an intervention for students that old, but we use it as a diagnostic so we can see what kids are below grade level to be able to provide them interventions. So we're going to start with our regions data. We did have students take the January regions, and our big excitement for the year was that our English language arts students in grade 11, there were 65 students who decided to challenge the test midway through the year, and 89% passed. So we were very excited to see that. They have not even completed that whole class yet, and we already have 89% passing there. So that was the great news for our January regions. The English language arts, it has the number 3. Those are students who are not currently taking the class live. It's their students who are in Cougar Ops retaking the class to try to gain the credit because they didn't pass it before. So those students also took the regions. We did not have any pass this time. They'll have another opportunity in June to take it. And then you can see the other numbers are all students who have failed those tests before that are attempting to take them again. So we're getting more students through each time. And again, they'll have another opportunity in June to take those again. Okay, so here's our iReady data for 9th grade for reading. And you'll notice that the high school students don't tend to make as much growth as the younger students. There's a large case for early intervention, and this is the reason why. It's a little bit harder when you're in high school to gain those reading skills, but we're not going to stop trying. And here's our 10th grade iReady reading. So we have our reading interventionist at the high school and a math interventionist. Student schedules were changed based on this data to put them into interventions to try to get their skills caught up as much as they can throughout the school year.
Megan, just if I could clarify, so they changed it to semester mark. So they made sure that they had more of a homogeneous grouping for the student to make sure they met their need. It wasn't like it's a fluid schedule and it changes at will. With the semester mark, with first semester completed, then they started hand scheduling students to make sure their needs were met for those core.
And then here's the 9th grade iReady math. And 10th grade iReady math. So definitely not where we want to be. Obviously, this is the first time we've actually had a measure for the high school to see what skill level students are at. So it's a great first step for us first to be able to identify it by skills and then provide the interventions that directly align to the skills that they're lacking so they can make growth in those areas. Again, we look at the report card honors. That's the percentage of students in each grade level that received honors. And there we go. And then this is the 2 or more classes, students that are failing 2 or more classes at the end of the second quarter, the percentage in each grade level.
Yeah, Megan, back to the honor roll. We used to have 4 categories, right?
Back when I was in school, there was a merit roll, but there isn't, that's not how it's set up for
Okay,
this.
I'm fine with it. So,
Yeah,
so like, honor roll starts at what grade, at what numerical value?
I believe it's 85 to 90,
Yeah.
and then 90 to 95, 95
Yeah,
to 100.
that sounds right to me. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yep. And we put in here just an update from Cougar Ops. We currently have 67 students that are part of the program, working to regain those credits that they had not passed in the past. So far, we've had 8 classes that have been recovered, and we have the potential to recover 87 classes by the end of the year. The second semester, we're growing the program to serve our at-risk 10th grade students, because we're seeing that there's a large group there who are starting to slip. We want to get them before they get too far behind. Okay, and on to the elementary school. As you know, we use a different data measure there right now. We use Ames Web instead of iReady, but we also continue to use the report card grades, attendance, the comment survey, which is the social emotional learning survey for the little ones. Again, the data related to interventions, the quick room visits, and crisis calls. So we're going to start with UPK. You can see along the side there, those are the skills that are measured. And in September to January, there is some great growth for our 4-year-olds. That's the percent of students that have mastered that. We also look at our oral reading fluency, and so you can see the grade levels and the fall and winter percent proficient students that are meeting that work per minute expectation. And so Ames Web at the elementary school is our diagnostic, it's our measure, but it's not an intervention. So whereas iReady is an intervention and a diagnostic, at the elementary school we have people working with the students to provide them interventions. And so Ames Web measures things a little bit differently, so I want to explain the red, yellow, and green to you here. This is not correlated to on grade level or below grade level. It's a little bit more complicated. So the students who fall into the green have an 80% or better probability of mastery, or proficiency, I'm sorry, of proficiency. If they're yellow.
What's the word? So I'm trying to go with 80% probability of what?
An 80% or better probability of reaching proficiency. It's complicated, and it's strange, and it's hard to understand, and that's why we think moving to iReady will be a lot better to understand. It's so much simpler because it's figuring out a probability of them falling within the middle range of like the bell curve of everybody who's taking the test. Yellow is 50 to 79% probability of proficiency, and then red, those students have less than 50% probability of proficiency. So you can see the colors changing as we go through here. Again, here's the kindergarten early literacy. First grade. Second grade, seeing some really nice gains. One thing we do, we're really interested in keeping track of the second grade cohort. This is the cohort that has not had any interrupted education from COVID. So this is our first group that's been here to receive instruction every day since they were little, and we are seeing some nice gains from them and some higher skills because they have not had any interrupted education like everybody from 3rd through 12th grade. Here's our 3rd grade. And 4th grade. back to kindergarten for their early numeracy skills. First grade. Their second grade. Third grade. And fourth grade. I know in the past we've shown this a little bit differently, like in charts with the numbers. I thought this kind of depicted a little bit easier to see where the movement was as far as the 3 different levels of where students were falling. But if you prefer the charts and numbers, that's something we have too, if you'd like that. So the other thing we do have to look at is chronic absenteeism. The state does hold us responsible for having students in school. These are the students who miss 20% or more instructional days throughout the year, and it's measured about every month to see how many students are hitting that. So we have some different interventions we use to improve student attendance. At the high school, we use something 2 times 10, which is a 2-minute check-in for 10 days straight to try to get that student connected to somebody within the school. We do phone calls home that are actually done by live people instead of just the robocalls. We're mandated to provide attendance letters when students reach a certain number of absences. We have to send those home. Teachers can put in a request for assistance for students who are missing a lot of school, so we can make sure that nothing is missed. We do go out and do home visits to try to get those students to come in. We invite parents in, and then if students are of the age that they do not need to attend, unfortunately, if they miss 20 days in a row, we try to do all these things, but we eventually do provide a drop letter. Sometimes that does motivate kids to come back, but that is something we do as well. And this does go into our SR rating as well. And that's all I have. Any other questions?
Megan, I have a question. I should have asked it before. The regents, the January regents, how many of those can they take again in the spring? All of them?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay. So this is just, it just gives the students an opportunity to see how they'll do.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
But if they've done well enough, would you take it again?
Correct.
They do not have to.
That's the goal. So our goal would be to start thinning it out so that when you start steering your resources and interventions from January to June, it's more toward that targeted population. So the ELA is a prime example, like our 11th graders taking in January. Our goal would be to be at the 90% proficiency level, then focus on that 10%. And the same type of thing when we talk about 8th graders coming over with credit. We'd love for our 8th graders to take those freshman level regents and come over with credit, and then start thinning it out so that the traditional pathway years ago used to be a junior would take 5 regents, and it's really test heavy. But if we can thin it out, start having our accelerated sophomores taking their ELA in June, then you have a chance of, increasing your proficiency, thinning out the number, and really targeting instruction.
For a student that wants to go to college, is there an advantage in maybe taking it and get a higher grade?
They definitely do that with respect to scholarships and everything like that, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Tina, you have the remote to control my screen? Or you want me to do it from down there?
No, I forgive you.
So just to piggyback on Megan's presentation, you'll recall in December, I brought to the board the recommendation with respect to the vendor we were going to use for the school climate survey, and then last month was asked just to provide an update. So I'm just going to go through briefly. you'll see this slide, you'll recognize it from December, but just really talking about a sustainable, positive school climate fosters youth development and learning necessary for productive, contributory, and satisfying life. That's a big one with respect to this, and I know it's been a board goal to have a climate survey issued, and really start looking at some of our norms, our values, our expectations as a way to keep people engaged and really thinking about what students, families, and educators can do if we all work together with that shared vision. So this was, again, a slide from December, and these are the 5 areas that we identified in looking at the vendor. The areas of improvement, enhancing student well-being, strengthening relationships, informed decision-making, and then continuous evaluation of our progress. So it was asked to, share some sample questions. So I have interspersed questions that are going to go out to parents, questions that go out to teachers and non-classroom personnel, as well as students. And this is just a smattering, so it's not a full comprehensive look, but I picked a bunch that I think are really at the core of what we talked about, students, families, staff working together. So you see under question 7, the school encourages students to take challenging classes no matter their race, ethnicity, nationality, or cultural background. And again, this is a canned survey, so for me personally, I would also like to see something that encourages our technical skills, our trades and things like that, but that's something right now where when you think about the intent, this is from the vendor, it's not something that, we dictate, but I think for our first round, this will get at some of those questions. The school providing instructional materials, textbooks, handouts, things that reflect cultural background, ethnicity, and identity. As you heard Megan say, we made a list for our ELL learners, so that might be something that committee studies when we start talking about particular areas of deficiencies. We have great staff, we have very dedicated teachers for ENL, but it's definitely something that we need to go ahead and look at a little bit further. The school provides effective resources and training for teaching students with IEPs. That's also something that I think gets at the core of, educating our students and understanding diverse backgrounds. Staff do a good job helping parents support their children in learning. Students are encouraged to get involved in extracurricular activities. Students at this school get along well with each other. At this school, students talk about the importance of understanding their own feelings and the feelings of others. I think bullying is a frequent problem at this school. I think that cyberbullying is a frequent problem among students at this school. We do a lot, if you recall our fall safety, where we had Trooper Klawicki come in and talk about cyberbullying, and he talked about cyber sexploitation and the number of students that are exposed to, the dark web and the things of that nature. Those are obviously things that are reflected here. Students at this school would feel comfortable reporting a bullying incident to a teacher or other staff. Staff at this school always stop bullying when they see it. At this school, how much of a problem is student drug use? At this school, how much of a problem is student use of electronic cigarettes? I know what to do if there's an emergency, a natural disaster, a tornado, a flood, or a dangerous situation. If I'm a person on campus during a school day. The school has a written plan that describes procedures to be performed in shootings. My teachers really care about me. I can talk to a teacher or other adult at this school about something that's bothering me. Adults working at this school help students develop strategies to understand and control their feelings and actions. School rules apply equally to all students. So that's just a quick sampling of, many of the questions that will go out. So give you a quick update on progress to this point. We're a little bit behind schedule from where I'd hoped to be, but we had the winter break in there, and then we had this February break that came up, and so when we talk about where we're at, our files have been sent. We've got confirmation from our vendor that the usernames are being created. In the next week or two, I'll be meeting with the respective administrators to talk about the next steps in terms of administering the surveys and making sure that things happen with fidelity. And then there will be a corresponding letter that goes out to the community informing them of the survey and the intent. And then that will also be accompanied by an opt-out letter. It's not something that we're going to expect to get 100% involvement in. It'd be ideal if we could, but as with any survey, there are certain questions that evoke emotions, and we want to give our student body, our parents, and our community an opportunity to opt out if they want. So the goal would be to have it administered over March, to get those results back in spring, and then, as I mentioned, in December, we want to continue to analyze and digest the results this spring in our summer program, and then we want to make sure that we're making informed decisions, including the adoption of evidence-based programs that align with identified needs. So that really talks about our approach to our school improvement plans. It talks about our district improvement plan, and certainly as we go into the next year, we need to revisit our strategic action plan, and I think the survey results should start yielding some positive, productive outcomes that will give us assessments. And as you've heard me say many times before, we're a group of people that work with people, so there are mistakes that are made from time to time. We won't hide from our blemishes, but I think this survey is certainly going to give us something to hang our hat on and go in a scientific-based approach. Questions?
What's the name of the vendor we're using?
We're going to use Nassau County BOCES.
So for staff, is it just teachers or all staff?
All staff.
All district staff?
They distinguish teachers being people in front of a classroom, people that are non-instructional,
Right.
and everybody else.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Pullen.
Thank you.
Tina, is there any public access requested tonight?
No, there's no one.
All right, thank you. We move on to the consent agenda. Motion, please, to approve the consent agenda. Shelley and John? The consent agenda goes over through page 3 in the middle. Any discussion? Paul?
So there's one thing, and I've talked to the clerk about this, on the minutes from the last meeting on 8 February. You may recall, I was struggling to hear
Yes.
those videos. So,
Those minutes, and that's why I can confirm with Paul which ones were voted on, which ones were not.
All right. Tina suggests that we pull them.
Okay.
She'll fix that for next meeting.
fine by me, yeah.
All right.
And then just a question on the lift, on number 5. No, that's a separate one, isn't it? That's on the consent agenda.
I'm sorry, Paul, I didn't understand what you said.
I have a question on, remember we're going to do a $75,700 for the lift in Bay 5. Is that in the consent agenda? I thought it was.
It's item D, 4D.
4D.
Oh, I see, yeah. So it's fine, I just want to know which building is it in? Is that the maintenance building over or here at the middle school, or is that the bus garage?
Joe, that's the bus garage, the transportation department. So the drive-on lift, remember when we walked down their facility, it's failed, so we're gonna replace that. And then the equipment, when we work with the vendor, we have the understanding that we wanna be able to relocate that lift in a new facility in a few years.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Michael, if we are forced to go to electric buses, does that lift accommodate the weight difference of an electric bus?
I don't know that. I would suggest probably not, but it's something where, again, right now, to replace our current setup, we're in dire needs. But I know the weight of the electric buses is one of the things that we're pushing back on with respect to the implementation plan at the state level, because our current equipment won't adequately support the weight of the bus.
And that is undoubtedly all school districts.
All school districts, I mean, regionally, we're continuing to push. You know, as I shared with the board previously, once Naples gets up and running with the two that they have as part of a state pilot program, I would suggest a group of us going down there and meeting with Kevin Schwartz, the superintendent from Naples, and his people, you know, just to get eyes on it, because they're a comparable size district, comparable in terms of geographic location, and then in terms of the struggle that he's had. So I think he's probably one of the premier resources in the region for us right now, just because he's not sold on it, but they have a grant, so they're implementing it. You know, there's a lot from the Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES region where we're pushing, you know, our local representatives to say the timeline's too aggressive, the sellback doesn't make sense. All of those things that we've all discussed individually and collectively before are really starting to gain more momentum and pushing back to say, you know, by 2035, it's not reasonable and it doesn't make sense when you can't get more than 100 miles out of a complete charge for a school bus. It might work great in a metropolitan area, but for a rural school district like us, it really continues to baffle me because it just doesn't make sense, especially when you can get 650 miles out of a full tank for a diesel bus.
Wouldn't it make sense, though, to make sure at least that we consider the fact that it might be pushed on us, that we have to have a couple of buses, and to ensure that the lift that's nearly $100,000 is going to do the job if we are forced to have electric buses?
Yeah, I honestly haven't been involved directly with that quote with respect to the implementation there. It's just a drive-on one that lifts, but with respect to the weight capacity, that's something, you know, Gary, I don't know if you're aware of whether they factored that in when they priced it out.
I don't believe they did.
Yeah, so. I mean, it's a situation right now where if we fail, we're gonna have to send if the lift continues to fail, we're gonna have to continue to rely on the mercy of other districts. So, my opinion, I understand what you're saying, being fiscally prudent and making sense of it. I also know that there's a sense of urgency there, and then with respect to if the timeline for electric buses gets pushed back, that's also a factor.
But if it doesn't, we're gonna have to spend $85,000 plus to accommodate the bus. I mean, this should last 20 years, I would imagine, this lift will.
I would hope so, but I also know we put about $50,000 into one arm of one of our other lifts a few years ago, and then we had to do all the remediation as well. So that facility, as we've talked before, you know, it's outlived its life purpose. You know, it's something that if you're not comfortable with it, certainly the board's prerogative to, you know, say no. That's something you guys can do, but
I don't think it's a matter of saying no. I think that, I mean, it's easily enough answered question to where if they found out tomorrow, hey, we can get a lift that lifts 5,000 pounds more for $5,000 more, we can call a meeting quick and approve something like that and still get it done this week. But I think spending $85,000 on a lift that we don't know if it's going to accommodate a bus that's in the horizon, I think is not fiscally responsible.
like I said, certainly the board's prerogative. I have no problem with that. I just haven't been directly involved with the quote because it doesn't fall under my umbrella.
Understood.
Yep,
How many lifts do we have?
3.
I wonder if it would be helpful if we could find out how much more a lift that would carry the weight of one of the new electric buses would be. How much, if it's excessive, which like most things are, maybe, it might be prudent. I'm wondering if we could approve this and have you look into it anyway.
But if we need 3 lifts, and right now we definitely need 1, I guess my suggestion is go ahead and buy this one, because it's going to be a while before we're going to need to accommodate, potentially if we have to have the electric buses. So I would,
This is the only drive-on lift that we have. We have other types of lifts, we have 2 other types of lift. This is the only drive-on. So my question is, if we do end up buying even a single electric bus, we should ensure that the drive-on lift, which we only have 1 of, will accommodate that $400,000 electric bus.
I'm not believing that we're going to have an electric bus in the near future. So by the time, hopefully, if we build a new bus garage, we will then be accommodating for what we're going to need long-term. But that's just my thought.
That's a good thought. Any other board members want to weigh in on that?
I kind of like your idea. I think if I can rephrase it, your recommendation is we vote on it, but we also task Mike, right, with determining whether it will accommodate an electric bus. Is that what you're trying to say, Cindy?
Yeah, I was.
So we could, if you decided to approve this tonight, and then you wanted to come back with an amended price, because we've done that before, Gary was able to get this approved as an emergency project, correct?
Not as an emergency project, but a secure transportation aid for the purchase of this.
Okay, so we could go back and amend it, because it is going to come back to us with significant aid associated with it. So if we go and say, look, can you do some more research, find out whether the bay that this is going in can accommodate a lift that can support an electric bus? Do we have the size? Because I mean, truthfully, with the weight there and the concrete that's underneath the lift, I worry about that as well. We can do that, and then if it comes out that it's another $25,000, to get a lift that can fit in that bay and the concrete and everything will support it, we can make the amendment at the next meeting.
Okay,
I like that.
all right.
You okay with it, Jason?
Yeah.
All right, any other discussion? Then all in favor of approving the consent agenda? Motion is carried. Number 5, the SECRA for the 24-25 capital outlay project. Motion please to approve. Tina and Paul? Discussion?
I'd like to ask,
John?
what will happen in the auditorium?
So right now, if you've been in that building lately, there's much improvement that's needed. So even, I'll tie it back to that survey and tie it back to our focal point as a collective group. We want clean, fresh, and inviting environment. So minimally, our goal would be new paint, new carpet, ideally lighting. We need to move to LED fixtures. We need new ceiling tiles. Many of the ceiling tiles that are up there are years old. If we can get to the place where, that can accommodate seats It certainly wouldn't be an auditorium similar to this, but we would have age-appropriate seats so that when people are there for performances and shows, they would actually be able to sit down in a chair versus, sitting on a concrete slab. And then eventually we would replace the lighting on the stage and the curtains on the stage. And then there's an accordion door that blocks the stage from the actual auditorium. That's probably outlived its purpose, but, with the capital outlay project, it hasn't been approved to increase to 250 like the governor has proposed in the past. That's one of the things that never makes it through the state's final round of budget. So we're limited to $100,000, and then by the time you get fees and design elements and stuff like that, we're right around that $80,000 mark. So our goal this year, from a design standpoint, has been to talk to our team and say, minimally, the carpet and the walls need to be refreshed. And I mean, the tiles and the sheetrock area as well. So those yellow subway tiles need to be painted, the walls need to be painted. That's a minimum for this project. And just to remind the community that the work won't start until the 24-25 academic year, because we're proposing this under part of next year's budget. So it has to be, capital outlay has to be spent by June 30 of 2025. So you're approving it for this year's budget vote, but the work won't start on it until the 24-25 academic year, with the intent being spent. And I liken that to what we've done with the high school library. It's very likely that the auditorium at the elementary will be a 2-year outlay. So if we're breaking them off into chunks so that we can get bids out and bid alternates, we want to try and grab as much of that work as we possibly can, and then phase it out. And it's likely, like I said, it's at least a 2-year project that'll coincide with the capital improvement project that just passed. We'll know more about schedule as we get further into the design element of the capital improvement project, because you'll recall that the gymnasium was part of that project. So we have to make sure you're not taking out both large gathering spaces at the same time, because that would be a heck of an inconvenience. Yeah.
And as you can imagine, I'm delighted that the auditorium is remaining. That was something I had not wanted to lose as a teacher in that building. So I'm happy that it's still going to be an auditorium and an alternate place for physical activity for kids. When the gym is occupied with gym classes, there's always that extra spot to use. Any more discussion on the secret? Then all in favor, roll call vote. Tina?
Cinda?
Yes.
Tina? Yes. John?
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Linda? Absent. Jason?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Thank you, motion is carried.
Motion is carried. Moving to board member request, comments, and discussion. Anyone have anything? Jason?
I was wondering if we could elaborate or talk more about the conversation we had last meeting regarding the second meeting of the month and the workshop setting that we agreed upon. This started probably 4 years ago. The Board of Education, as a group, decided that they were going to make the second meeting of the month a workshop meeting. We've never done it. So I'm just trying to figure out what happened this year to force another year to go by that we don't have that second meeting of the month to be a workshop.
Or at least start out, right? I'm not even sure how we do that. We've talked about it, and we've all, I don't know if we all, but I can certainly remember agreeing that we wanted to do the second meeting as a workshop. I don't know whether that would mean we would meet here, in the conference. It has to be an open meeting. But yeah, I'd like to do the workshop.
I guess I'm a little astounded because we've had workshops. In fact, we just came from one. We do what business we have to do, and we intend to go back into workshop. We've had presentations that would normally have been in a business meeting so that the board could talk about things rather than just listening to the presentation. I'm a little surprised that you feel we haven't had any at all.
In November and December, remember, we only have one meeting. So our workshop is gone, those 2 meetings. We had one in October, and we just had one tonight.
So what we agreed upon, I'm sorry if you're taking offense to it, what we agreed upon was to put a schedule together of discussion topics for the year for the second meeting. And we've done that for numerous years in a row, and we haven't done it.
I'm sorry, I don't have a list of topics that the board has told me they want workshops on. I've tried to put workshops together that have, we've needed to have to keep in our schedule of what we have to do, and been open enough to have the ability to put in a workshop as we're doing tonight that would be appropriate and relevant at the time that it's needed. I guess I hear what you're saying, Jason. I'm wondering what the rest of the board is thinking about this.
I know we've talked about an opportunity to talk with each other, and that was kind of where we got this workshop idea. And I agree with you that, yeah, I don't know whether the workshop should be, it has to be an open meeting. I understand with the open meetings law. I don't know whether it should be a meeting like this, or whether it's a more meeting where we can be, less where we have the consent agenda and then the formal agenda. Maybe a less formal is, I think, what we're trying to get at.
Well, I think the challenge is, it's the month of December, the month of November. We have one meeting. And so then we get caught up and there's other work that needs to be done. And because I agree, I do believe that we did talk about wanting more workshops. I think the challenge is, it's finding the time to do it. I do recommend that if there's workshops or topics we want to have now, can we maybe, put that out there and then have workshops moving forward? But I do think it's November and December that really preclude us from having the time to do that, maybe?
Well, and this year is an example of the fact that we're hindered by the fact that the board goals didn't get done until the end of November. And I'm not criticizing that, I'm just saying, making a fact. If we had them done closer to the beginning of the school year, we would have had another 3 months to get everything situated. So I appreciate the fact that you're 100% right. We had a break in December, we had a break in January, and it's kind of limited our meetings, but that's all as a result of the board goals not being done until December.
John?
I think workshops are wonderful things. I just don't know the format of how we would have a meeting that's advertised that would be like this or in a room. And just how do we go about doing it? Maybe other districts do it. Maybe we should dovetail off of their experiences. I don't know.
Well, I think it would be done the same way as tonight's meeting, tonight's workshop regarding the recording places. We're going to set, the way I took it when we discussed it was that all board members were going to have input on different discussion topics for those workshops, and we as a whole would decide on which discussions we wanted to have. And once those topics were written down, we could schedule it, and it would be advertised the same way. So instead of talking about recording devices, we might be talking about the parking situation at the elementary school, or we might be talking about the transition to electric buses, whatever it is, better cookies, better cookies for the meetings, whatever you want. But the opportunity to talk as a group, which we have not done, in 5 years, really, that often, a couple times.
Well, I think one workshop we should have is to talk about how do we get the board's goals done earlier? And how do we do that in collaboration with our administration? So, you know, I think that's a positive, right? We want to work collaboratively together, and maybe now with this survey, that will help us to help direct us to be able to do that.
Well, the great thing about workshops is during the summer, we'd have workshops that had time allocated for board goals, so you could be working on them proactively.
Well, I think that's a good idea. But I do remember that we were going to make the second meeting of the month a workshop. But I'm kind of with John and Shelley. Okay, how do we do that?
I think there's a difference of opinion perhaps in what a workshop is, in that we did get together and do our goals for this year. We visited buildings. We have had the capital improvement engineers here, all of those things. And apparently what you're thinking of as a workshop is where we just kind of sit around and chat.
Yeah, but not just socially, but I mean, yeah, we would have an agenda, not necessarily a published agenda. We're going to talk about electric buses, for example.
So what do you want me to do?
I have a problem with that in the respect that we still have to follow the rules.
Sure.
And we're running a business, like it or not, it's a business. And things come up that have to be dealt in a timely manner. So you have to have a meeting that's formal. I mean, it's only smart to have one so that you accomplish what you have to do legally as well as informally. So there have to be two separate entities, I think.
I think you're right. And that's kind of what we've been doing, but except that we haven't had the workshop. Or we've had the second meeting, formal, do whatever we have to do, and we haven't had a follow-on.
I have a question. Has anyone submitted a request for a workshop other than Jason with policy regarding recordings? Nope.
I'm not sure why you're taking offense to it. A board is a whole. The board as a whole decided that they wanted the second meeting to be a workshop. This wasn't a Jason and a Paul thing. During our meetings, you think it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do. When you check with each other, was you got that, Paul? It's okay with you, Jason? It's kind of obvious. Yes.
Oh, okay.
You remember we were going to make the workshop?
We've talked about
John remembers.
Oh, we've absolutely talked about doing this, but there's a hidden agenda here tonight, and it makes me real uncomfortable.
I don't mean to make you feel uncomfortable.
Huh? You did.
I asked you about,
No, I'm done.
All right. I'm not sure what you want me to do with this, board members, but, John?
Could I make a suggestion on that? March is coming up, and maybe a email written or something to you of suggestions that we might have for a topic for the second meeting in March.
So you don't want to talk, about the capital project then
Well, that could be
at
one.
the next workshop?
That could be one.
You know, I mean, that's
That is
something we
already
have to do.
scheduled.
And we have to, the budget to get in yet, and we've got a lot of things that we have to do.
Evaluations.
And it needs that second meeting, when I first came on the board, there was only one meeting a month, and the board meetings would go to 11 o'clock at night, because everything was being discussed in one night, and it's been put into two. The workshop was the time that we thought would originally, that it would be the time to do some of those other special things, like the budget, or a capital project, or a policy that we're talking about, or that kind of specific thing. We have started early at 4 o'clock nights, trying to fit things in. Don't count yourself short on all that you do. There's a lot that the board has to do and does do.
Yeah, I think it was just a matter of more of that we want to be able to talk more freely and more comfortably. So yeah, I agree, John, absolutely. You got to have a formal part, and then maybe it's a follow-on workshop.
Perhaps. Workshops are tough if you really need to have a specific topic and goal in mind. Otherwise, what I have found in workshops, and including this board, it gets, nothing really gets accomplished, it's just talk. And you come away wondering, well, we didn't decide anything because we can't do business and decide things at a workshop. It's more of an informative kind of thing. Not that that's a bad thing, but I do apologize if I haven't done what you wanted me to do in scheduling our meetings. I guess not knowing quite what to do, if John had a suggestion, letting me know, was it you or Tina? If there are topics you'd like me to bring forward that you'd like to talk about as a board, then we would decide. Let me know. That's satisfactory for tonight?
Yes, and actually, we've always had this board member request comments discussion, or at least not always, but this last year we have, so that would be a good place to make suggestions for a workshop.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because of the time, I'm going to eliminate the good news we need to get on. I know Paul, but we need to get on to our workshop. So if you can save that for the next meeting, Paul. Would a motion please to adjourn the business meeting here? John and Shelley, any discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Meeting is adjourned.